Okay, listen to this. Global icon Jennifer Lopez, a woman who's weathered some incredibly public heartbreaks, professional setbacks too, right? She dropped this bombshell recently, said that navigating her kids' teenage years is, quote, the most heartbreaking time. And get this, she claims the pain is way worse than any romantic split she's ever experienced. Her exact words. I thought my heart had been broken before. No, this is the worst. Wow. Welcome to Starscript Report. I'm your host, and today we are really digging into the Hollywood drama, the music industry pressures, by focusing on the very personal choices of one of the most famous mothers on the planet.
And I'm here to help unpack that. We're definitely going beyond the headlines today, past the red carpet stuff. We're doing a real deep dive into J.Lo's, well, her very intentional framework for parenting her 17-year-old twins, Max and Emmy. Like, what does it actually take to raise grounded teenagers when your life is lived, as she puts it, at a stratospheric height?
That's exactly our mission. We've pulled out the key insights, focusing on the huge, really quantifiable sacrifices she made just this past summer, and why she calls her own kids her toughest audience. That's fascinating. Plus, the pretty surprising ways she tailors her bond differently for her son, who's super private, versus her daughter, who's a bit more public-facing. We want to show you how she built this parenting model right under the world's microscope.
Yeah, we're looking at this relationship not just as, a mother's love, but almost like a strategic operation. It's an exercise in differentiated parenting, resilient parenting. We'll get into that universal struggle of parental separation, even when that separation is really just about them growing up. Let's unpack the reality behind that really powerful opening quote.
Okay, yeah, let's start right there. That statement, teenage separation being tougher than a breakup, that's coming from someone who's been through some very public divorces, called off engagements. Is this pain really worse, or is it maybe the kind of pain parents sometimes, I don't know, romanticize a bit?
It feels like a different kind of depth, maybe.
Yeah.
Rooted in a sort of loss of identity for the parent, too. The source material really captures this stark emotional shift she's dealing with. She still lovingly calls Max and Em her coconuts. It's this nickname they've had since they were babies, born back in 2008. It signals that constant foundational love.
Right, the coconuts. And she talks about that earlier phase, when they were her best little friend who loves being with you all the time. That closeness. But then adolescence hits, and that shifts inevitably to, well, boundary setting. She mentioned that classic kind of painful phrase, get out of my room.
Ugh, yeah. And that phrase, for any parent, it can feel like a rejection, right?
Yeah.
Even though developmentally, it's just the kid building their own space, finding independence.
Yeah.
What's really interesting here, though, is her deliberate strategy for reframing that conflict, for seeing it differently.
Okay, how does she reframe it? What's the trick?
Well, instead of seeing that typical teenage phase of challenging everything as like defiance or just being difficult, she chooses to see it as necessary growth, intellectual growth. The sources say she consciously believes they're questioning things because they're genuinely trying to find answers,
Yeah.
form their own identities, figure out their values. It's an active search, not a personal attack on her.
So she turns the eye-rolling, the why do we have to do this, into something essential for them. That's quite a perspective shift. And this approach, this sort of welcoming of challenge, it even extends to their opinions on her massive career, which is pretty wild.
Exactly. She openly asks for their critiques of her new music, calls their opinions brutally honest. And she apparently accepts this feedback, calling it a good ouch. Imagine that pressure. Performing a new song, not for millions of fans, but for your teenager who's going to give it to you straight. That feels like a real grounding mechanism.
Totally. And that dynamic, it immediately validates their view, right? It keeps her grounded. If she accepts them as her toughest audience professionally, it reinforces that she's mom first, and their honesty is what really matters in that house. This kind of sets the stage for how she connects with them as the very different individuals they are.
Which brings us straight to the first pillar of her strategy, what we're calling individuated connection. She's raising twins, yes, but she maintains those emotional bonds using almost opposite approaches, tailored to their specific needs. Let's look at Em first.
Right. Emmy's bond is the one we've seen more publicly. It seems defined by this shared language, the arts, music, theater. This passion is like a cornerstone for them. The sources mention things like going to see Merrily We Roll Along or Othello on Broadway and how those were key moments for them.
Yeah, but it's important, I think, not to just assume this shared public activity is about, boosting Emmy's career. The sources really insist that J.Lo sees the shared stage, like that famous duet at the 2020 Super Bowl, not as a career move for Em, but as the medium for their connection. It's the space where they speak the same language, artistically.
Okay, but how tough is it to keep the stage the medium and not let it become the goal? Especially in that world, fame is such a powerful draw.
It must take extreme intention.
Yeah.
I think the most powerful example wasn't even a performance. It was that act of public affirmation she gave at a gala in 2022. She introduced Emmy on stage using gender-neutral they-them pronouns. And this wasn't just casual. It felt like a loud worldwide celebration of Emmy's confidence, their authenticity. It
Yeah.
basically said, on a huge stage, I see you, I celebrate the identity you're choosing for yourself.
Wow, that's powerful. That public declaration really cements that artistic bond, but layers it with deep acceptance.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's flip to Max because his path seems totally different.
Completely different. Max is described as much more introverted, laid back, apparently has an incredible vocabulary, and asks these deep questions about life.
Hmm.
So the connection strategy for Max is the inverse of Emmy's. It's defined by intense privacy.
So for Max, it's about creating the sanctuary of normalcy. The bond happens privately, low-key moments cuddling at home, making sure she's there for school stuff, just being mom. And this focus on privacy, this is what led to that, really dramatic demonstration of commitment this year, right?
Absolutely. The cancellation of her entire This Is Me live tour. Summer 2024. We're not talking about taking a week off. This was halting a massive professional project. Huge revenue, huge momentum. She announced she was taking time off to be with her children, family, and close friends. And later, she apparently called it the best thing I think I've ever done.
For someone whose entire brand is built on relentless work ethic, canceling a tour like that, it just quantifiably proves that private family time was the absolute priority. That deliberate absence from her public life becomes the active commitment she fosters with Max. It's presence over performance, clearly defined.
And this curated privacy seems to have created this interesting dynamic reversal.
Yeah.
Max is apparently so grounded that he sometimes acts as her gentle corrective. Like he'll call her out if she gets too wrapped up in work. He's the quiet anchor, reminding her about the difference between J.Lo, the icon, and, just mom.
So she's juggling these two totally different parenting tracks, but the whole operation is under this constant, unforgiving glare of global fame, which pivots us neatly to the second pillar of her strategy, resilience in action. How do you build that internal protection against such an intense external microscope?
Well, she's clearly very aware of the burden her fame places on them. She recognizes they didn't choose that life and that they're constantly being judged by people that you don't even know. The sources suggest the kids themselves have even said that when they walk into a room, people see the idea of them, not them. That's a heavy burden for a teenager.
So what's the core defense? How does she try to arm them against all that scrutiny?
The core philosophy seems to be instilling unconditional self-worth and self-love. And this isn't just saying, I love you. It's framed as a proactive defense mechanism. It's about explicitly separating their value as people from their achievements or what the public thinks.
And she gives them practical tools too, doesn't she?
Absolutely. The sources mention she teaches them little key things like your thoughts create your life, so to think positive.
Right.
So it's a technique, really, to control the internal narrative when the outside world is constantly trying to define you from the outside in, giving them an internal compass.
And again, her wanting their approval seems key to validating them. She sees impressing her kids as the most meaningful applause. That's such a reversal of the usual celebrity dynamic. It empowers them, right? Knowing their honest opinion matters more than any critics.
And this whole resilience framework, it was really put to the test during big family transitions, blending families, and more recently, navigating public relationship shifts.
That brings up a really critical question, I think. How does a celebrity model integrity and strength through public turmoil without it just looking scripted or performative?
Well, when she first started blending families with Ben Affleck, the sources say she approached it with so much care. The goal was for his kids to see her as an ally and vice versa for her kids. That initial period of stability was apparently so important to her, she called that first year the best year since my kids were born. But, life happens, transitions come.
Right. So when things shifted again and she went through that difficult separation period more recently, she seemed to turn the crisis itself into, like, a lesson plan for the kids. She didn't hide the difficulty, but she promised them something through it.
Exactly. She made this very direct, very powerful and, yeah, very public promise to them during that tough time. I promise you, this is a difficult time, but you're going to see that I'll come out the other side stronger and better.
And by actually doing that, by showing resilience, showing recovery under that intense microscopic public gaze, she gave them this incredibly tangible, real-world lesson in integrity. She didn't just tell them to be strong, she modeled the whole process of emerging from crisis. That lived example has got to be way more impactful than any lecture.
It really feels like the third pillar, proactive empowerment. Modeling that strength ensures the bond she built was robust enough to handle the public scrutiny, the personal crises, and her choice to cancel the tour this past summer, it really underscores this. It happened at a moment when stability and just her presence were probably the most crucial things for her kids.
Okay, so if we boil down this whole adaptive parenting model, what are the three key strategies, the pillars that really define J.Lo's approach with Max and M?
Okay, first pillar, individuated connection. Using totally different strategies, connecting with M through shared public art, and with Max through that fiercely guarded private time and normalcy.
Right. Second, proactive empowerment. Arming them with that internal compass, self-worth, positive thinking to buffer against the crazy effects of fame and scrutiny.
And third, resilience in action. Modeling strength, modeling integrity by turning her own public challenges into real-life lessons for growth and keeping that promise to come out stronger.
That really was a deep dive into, well, responsive parenting under extraordinary circumstances. Okay, here's a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to take away. If arguably the most famous, most driven mother in the world finds she has to halt a massive professional tour, sacrificing all that momentum, all that revenue, and actively retreat into privacy to truly nurture her bond with her kids, what does that really tell us about the true, maybe non-negotiable cost of that level of celebrity? And maybe more importantly, how should we be thinking about the value of unconditional, undivided presence in our own busy, non-celebrity lives? You've been listening to Starscope Report, where we uncover the stories shaping Hollywood, music, and pop culture. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.